Always remember, if you're having a bad day, yelling at people in a Call of Duty lobby is a great way to improve your mood. Hey there, kids, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Uncle Frank, hoping that you are having a great day. And in today's video, we're going to be sitting back, relaxing, and following up on my last video where we talk a bit more about Yu-Gi-Oh! And just the general trend of the game and what I think can most easily be done to rectify the current state of the game in general, just the overall feel of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because there's a lot of negativity going on with Yu-Gi-Oh! In case you didn't watch the last video, not just in terms of secondary market prices, overall opinions towards the metagame, the just general attitude towards Yu-Gi-Oh! The fact that we are in one of the biggest bull markets, one of the biggest hype seasons that any TCG market has ever experienced, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Is being left in the dust, that's a bit of a red flag, you know? But I don't believe it's all gloom and doom. I don't believe Yu-Gi-Oh! Is circling the drain, so to speak. I don't believe that it is, I don't believe Yu-Gi-Oh! Is dying. I believe it's in not as great a spot as it could be. And I do believe that there are some simple solutions that Konami could implement today and start turning things around. So let's go into three things. I don't like looking at my hands on camera. They're so thick and sausage-like. I gotta lose more weight. There are three things I believe Konami could change that would overall improve the Yu-Gi-Oh! Experience for the better and would potentially maybe not make it the best game on the market, but could go a long way towards making it giving a less pessimistic outlook towards the future of the game for people like me in general. The thing number one they could do, they could really cut back on releases. Yu-Gi-Oh! Of all the major TCGs on the market right now really does not need to see all the releases that they are getting, because it's like, what, we are 7 months in, we've got 5 boxes this year alone. That's a lot of sets, especially for a card game where those individual sets aren't particularly doing well. I do believe that Konami could benefit from cutting the number of sets in half, effectively, and just moving the big spotlight cards from the ancillary sets like Battle of Mayhem and Maze of the Master, Battle of Legends, sorry, and Maze of the Master. They can move the cards from those sets into the proper sets like Duelist's Advance, for instance. And I do genuinely believe that just doubling a set size as opposed to having a new set every other month would go a long way towards removing some of the fatigue that Yu-Gi-Oh! Players are experiencing overall, and also helping to consolidate some of the market. Because, yeah, right now is not a great time to be stretching Yu-Gi-Oh! Players' wallets with multiple sets back to back to back. Right now, what Konami should really be focusing on, in my opinion, they should be focusing on consolidating the attention of their players, whether that's financial attention, gameplay attention, or otherwise. They should be focusing on releasing a handful of spot-on sets per year. And the thing about a lot of the recent Yu-Gi-Oh! Sets, and I've said this before, there are some really good cards in a lot of these sets, and it's really a shame that a lot of these boxes are $50 and under, because there's some genuinely good pulls in a lot of these boxes. It's just that the reprints, the overall player fatigue, the attitude towards the metagame, a lot of this downward pressure is not in favor of a multiple box back-to-back release window. So I do genuinely believe that if they just cut back on the sheer volume of sets coming out to the market and just put all the nice big shiny gimmick cards from Monster Mayhem into Duelist's Advance, at an appropriate pull rate. You know, fix the pull rates, make the gimmick cards rare for one. The chibi specialty rares should have an appropriate pull rate to make them feel a bit more collectible, you know? Maybe don't put 30 frickin' Starlet rares on a set. Make them rarer, make them more desirable. I don't suppose I should say make them rarer. Make less of them, because the rarity is fine. The pull rate of them is fine. It's the fact that there's a bunch of them, and not all of them are home runs. You guys know what I'm saying, though. Thing number 2 that I think Konami could do today to really start improving the overall outlook towards Yu-Gi-Oh! As a whole is, I do genuinely believe, some more attention to card balance and power level could be implemented. Konami has never been good about power creep. They are, perhaps, in my opinion, the worst of the big 3 TCGs when it comes to power creep. Ask anybody who's been playing Yu-Gi-Oh! For the last 10 years and you'll get the same story. The game just gets faster and more powerful. I don't think that the answer is just a broad banning of a bunch of the strongest cards, nor do I think that something like rotation would particularly do well with Yu-Gi-Oh! But I do believe that there are steps Konami could take, particularly in providing support to a wider variety of archetypes, a wider variety of creature types, etc., to really broaden the what's the market share? No. What's it called when there's a diversity of available viable decks in a format? Is it just more interesting metagame? I don't know what the technical term for that is. I'm sure somebody in the comments section will teach me it, though. Do that. Making more decks viable by printing not necessarily stronger cards just for those decks, but bringing those decks up to par with what's out there, and then going forward, doing more to balance things out can be a good step in the right direction. You know, far too often we get metagames where one deck is completely left in the dust, even though, like 6 months ago, that deck was the all-star tier 0 best of in the format. It happens a lot with this game. I think Konami could definitely do a bit better in regards to balancing things out so that more deck types can see prominence. Parity, I suppose, is a good way to say it. You know, having 1 or 2 or 3 really strong decks is fine if you're looking for a really fast, really powerful format. But I believe that the longevity of Yu-Gi-Oh! Can be improved if more players feel like their weird one-off decks of the past have better staying power with the metagame going forward. I know I phrased that entire thing really weird, but I'm hoping you guys understand what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say that, you know, if there are more viable decks for longer periods of time, it will improve the overall outlook towards the competitive play and how people feel about competitive viability. And then, finally, the final thing that I think Konami can do to help Yu-Gi-Oh! As a whole, give us English Rush Duels. Please. I cannot stress enough how important I think it is that there is a good onboarding experience for an IP, okay? And Yu-Gi-Oh! Does not currently have an onboarding experience. You can't really look at me honestly and say that the starter decks and the structure decks are a good way to introduce people to the game, because too many of those these days are designed around the metagame at the time of their release. You know, and if you're not brought up to speed with how the decks play and with all the mechanics going into various Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks, timing, etc., you're going to be left in the dust regardless of how up to speed those decks may or may not be. And part of that is just the problem of the evolution of Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh!, as I said before, is a game with a very long history of power creep, mechanic creep, complexity creep. There's been a lot of excess evolution going into this game since its inception, or at the very least, I would say since the 5Ds era, really. The first few years were okay. There was definitely power creep in the early days, obviously. I'm not denying that. But ever since 5Ds and forward, it's definitely felt like every new era to Yu-Gi-Oh has been more complex and more powerful than the previous. This makes it so that someone getting into Yu-Gi-Oh nowadays with the same skill level of someone getting into it 20 years ago, there's going to be a big difference to how they experience the game for the first time. This, in part, is why a lot of newer players are being pushed towards the retro formats. Having played a bunch of Rush Duels, I can definitely tell you that the overall feel is very different from modern Yu-Gi-Oh! In terms of complexity, power level, and overall sense of depth. Not to say that I think Rush Duels is necessarily a shallow game, it's just that it doesn't feel like I need to be as mechanically tuned in to enjoy myself. I don't need a breakdown of every single meta viable option I have available just to make a fun deck and to enjoy myself. With that in mind, I do think Rush Duels is maybe not a good way to onboard people into Yu-Gi-Oh! The TCG, but I do think it's a good way to bring people into the IP, giving them a more casual, relaxed, enjoyable, and a bit more condensed Yu-Gi-Oh! Experience with a new rule set. Obviously, technically it's a different card game, but I do believe it is a good way to bring people into the fold. And if they want to transition into the much more hectic, high-power Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG, then they're welcome to do so after they're familiar with the game and the general mechanics. Because Rush Duels, while it's not the same, it does give you similar mechanics. There are big differences in rules, but I do believe that Rush Duels is a good game with a lot of potential in the West. So I've said this plenty of times in the past, and I'm going to continue saying it until we get it. We do need an English Rush Duels release, and I genuinely hope that that day where we finally get to see English Rush Duel cards, I hope that they come soon. Anyway, that's all I got for you kids today. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like, share, and subscribe. I would appreciate it so very much if you did. Leave a comment down below to let me know what you think about this video. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Do you think I'm crazy? I look forward to whatever your statements may or may not be. Ciao.